All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a figure who's been romanticized, demonized, and everything in between.
You're talking about Ludwig II of Bavaria, right?
The one and only. Born in 1845, died in 1886 under some pretty suspicious circumstances.
Ah, yes. The Swan King, the Fairy Tale King, but also, let's not forget, sometimes labeled the Mad King.
Exactly. And you've given me his Wikipedia page, which, wow, there's a lot to unpack there.
It's dense, for sure, but it really paints a picture of his reign, his obsessions, all the controversies.
And that's our goal today, right? To get past those easy labels and really understand who Ludwig II was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for you listening, we want to go through the key moments of his life. Like, how did he even become king? What drove him to build these fantastical castles?
And of course, the big mystery. How did he die? Was it suicide, or is there more to the story?
Those are the questions that keep historians up at night. But first, maybe we should start with his childhood. Born Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm in 1845 at Nymphenburg Palace in Munich. Not exactly a humble beginning.
Not at all. And even his name was significant. Elder son of Maximilian II of Bavaria and Marie of Prussia, but it was his grandfather, Ludwig I, who insisted on the name Ludwig.
After St. Louis IX of France, no less. They even shared the same birthday. It's like destiny was calling from day one.
Talk about pressure. Growing up, it seems he was constantly reminded of his royal duties, subjected to a very strict upbringing.
Lots of education, rigorous exercise, the whole 9 yards. It makes you wonder if that contributed to his later eccentricities.
Yeah, it must have been intense. And the sources suggest he wasn't exactly close to his parents. He once referred to his mother as my predecessor's consort.
Ouch. It's pretty telling. It seems he was closer to his deposed grandfather, Ludwig I, which is interesting given Ludwig I's own colorful past.
Right. But there were some brighter spots in his childhood, especially at Hohenschwangau Castle.
Ah, yes. That fairy tale-esque castle built by his father filled with frescoes of German legends, particularly the story of Lohengrin, the Swan Knight. You can see how these images and stories would have influenced him.
It's like his imagination was being fed these romantic mythical tales from a young age.
Exactly. And it wasn't just passive observation. He had a close relationship with his aide-de-camp, Prince Paul, involving poetry and even acting out scenes from Wagner's operas.
Even though it ended when Prince Paul got engaged, it shows you the depth of his emotions, his early interest in drama, and then there's his lifelong friendship with his cousin, Empress Elizabeth of Austria.
Another fascinating figure, known for her independent spirit. Maybe they found solace in each other, being royals who didn't quite fit the mold.
It's a fascinating parallel. But then, in 1864, everything changes. His father dies unexpectedly, and Ludwig, at just 18, becomes king.
He was young, handsome, and initially popular. But the sources are clear. He was totally unprepared for the role.
He kind of just continued his father's policies out of obligation, but his heart wasn't in it. His true passions were art, music, and architecture.
And you see those passions emerge almost immediately. One of his first acts as king was to summon Richard Wagner to his court.
Wagner, who was, let's be honest, a controversial figure at the time.
A genius, yes, but also a radical and constantly in debt. So this move by Ludwig was a huge statement. He also started building a new court theater right away. Clearly, the arts were his priority.
But governing, not so much. He began to withdraw from public life, preferring seclusion and focusing on his creative projects.
He held his last military parade inspection in 1875, his final court banquet in 1876. That pretty stark departure from what's expected of a king.
You know, his mother once worried about her extremely introverted and creative son who spent much time daydreaming. It's like she saw this coming.
Perhaps she did. This avoidance of Munich and the government caused tension with his ministers, but he remained popular with the public.
Unserkini, they called him, our cherished king. It seems they were willing to overlook his eccentricities.
Maybe they saw something genuine in him that the politicians didn't. He also enjoyed traveling the Bavarian countryside, connecting with the common people, rewarding those who were hospitable to him.
A bit of a Robin Hood complex, maybe?
Perhaps. But we can't forget the political landscape of the time. Bavaria was caught in the middle of some major conflicts, like the Austro-Prussian War in 1866 and the Franco-Prussian War just a few years later.
And those wars had a huge impact on Bavaria's independence. Joining the North German Confederation in 1870 meant giving up their kingdom status.
But they did negotiate some special rights. The Reserve Tract, they kept their own diplomatic corps, and the Bavarian army had some autonomy in peacetime. So not a total absorption into the German Empire.
Then comes the creation of the German Empire itself, with Wilhelm I becoming emperor. Ludwig's role in this is complicated.
To say the least. He was basically strong-armed into endorsing the whole thing, writing the Kaiser brief under pressure from Bismarck. They even used financial incentives to sway him.
And he clearly resented it. He refused to attend Wilhelm's proclamation in Versailles, sending his brother and uncle instead.
A deliberate snub, for sure. After 1871, he pretty much withdrew from politics completely, devoting himself to his artistic endeavors.
And this is where the fairy tale king image really solidifies. His personal life was unconventional, to say the least. There was pressure for him to marry and produce an heir, which led to his engagement to his cousin, Duchess Sophie Charlotte.
They shared a love for Wagner, which Ludwig saw as the main substance of our relationship. But he kept postponing the wedding, and eventually he broke it off.
He even used names from Wagner's opera Lohengrin in his letters to her after the breakup. It's like he was living in a Wagnerian fantasy world.
And it's significant that he never married or had any known mistresses. His diaries and letters hint at homosexual desires, which must have been incredibly difficult to grapple with given his Catholic faith and the social norms of the time.
Homosexuality wasn't punishable in Bavaria itself, but when Germany unified in 1871, paragraph 175 came into effect, criminalizing it nationwide.
It adds another layer of complexity to his withdrawal from public life. He did have close friendships with men, and there are even suggestions of a royal staff member helping to facilitate these relationships.
It's a reminder that history is full of nuances, and people are rarely easily categorized. And then there's his legendary patronage of the arts, particularly his relationship with Richard Wagner.
It's hard to overstate how important Ludwig was to Wagner's career. He was captivated by Wagner's operas from a young age, seeing Lohengrin when he was just 15.
And Wagner at that point was practically a fugitive, constantly in debt, running from creditors, known for his radical politics. Ludwig's support was a game changer.
A few months into his reign, he gave Wagner this incredibly long private audience. Wagner was floored, writing about how Ludwig's beauty, his grace, and the inspiring fervor of his manner had overwhelmed him.
Talk about a royal fanboy. And Ludwig put his money where his mouth was. He gave Wagner a villa, funded the Bayreuth Festspielhaus, even paid for Wagner's family home.
Without Ludwig, it's doubtful that Wagner would have finished masterpieces like Tristan und Isolde, Die Meistersinger, The Ring Cycle, or Parsifal. It's a textbook example of patronage done right.
Absolutely. Ludwig was fully immersed in Wagner's world, attending rehearsals and performances, really diving into those mythical stories and grand emotions. But he didn't just support Wagner, he was passionate about the arts in general.
Right. In 1867, he hired Karl von Perfel to run his new court theater, with a mission to expose Munich audiences to a wider range of European drama. We're talking Shakespeare, Calderon, Mozart, even Ibsen.
And he wasn't just throwing money at it. He personally oversaw these productions, demanding high standards for even classics like Schiller and Molière. He was an active participant in the cultural life of his kingdom.
And then there was a separate Vorstellung, the private performances, over 200 of them between 1872 and 1885. Sometimes he'd be alone, sometimes with a single guest.
Operas, ballets, plays, often about the era of Bourbon France. It wasn't just about being a recluse, was it?
He actually explained to the actor Ernst Possart that he couldn't fully lose himself in the theater if he was aware of the audience watching him. It speaks to a deep shyness, a desire for a pure artistic experience.
It makes him more human, you know. But of course, we can't talk about Ludwig without talking about his castles. These weren't just residences, they were expressions of his deepest fantasies.
And it's important to note these were funded from his personal fortune and loans, not state funds. Though that distinction got a bit blurry later on.
Right. He was inspired by places like Chateau de Pierrefonds, Versailles, Wartburg. He wanted to emulate the grandeur of French architecture, but with his own unique twist.
And while they were extravagant, they did provide jobs and economic benefits to the areas where they were built. It's a complicated legacy. Let's start with Neuschwanstein.
The quintessential fairy tale castle, perched on a cliff overlooking his childhood home. Started in 1869, filled with frescoes depicting scenes from Wagner's operas. It's like stepping into a Wagnerian dreamscape.
And it was never actually finished. But even incomplete, its impact is undeniable. The inspiration for Disney's Sleeping Beauty castles, visited by millions every year.
Then there's Linderhof, completed in 1878. Smaller, but incredibly ornate. This neo-French Rococo palace with its Venus grotto and little replicas of scenes from Wagner's operas.
The Venus Grotto is amazing. An artificial cave with electric lighting, a boat shaped like a shell. It's pure fantasy brought to life. He was also obsessed with Louis XIV, and that's reflected throughout Linderhof.
The Sun King and the Moon King, huh? Even his moonlit sleigh rides in an elaborate 18th century sleigh played into that image.
And then we have Harenchimsea, his most ambitious project, started in 1878 on an island in Chiemsee Lake. It was meant to be a grander replica of Versailles, surpassing the original in its splendor.
But like Neuschwanstein, it was never finished. Only the central portion was built before his death, and tragically, he only lived there for 10 days.
It's sad, really, all these unfinished dreams. And we can't forget the winter garden on the roof of the Munich residence palace, an indoor lake, a Himalayan panorama, all this fantastical stuff built on a rooftop.
Sadly, it was dismantled after his death due to water damage, but it speaks to his boundless imagination. But all this extravagance came with a price. By 1885, he was deeply in debt, even though he was using his own money.
And he refused to cut back. His ministers were getting increasingly worried both about the finances and about his mental state. They started plotting to remove him from power.
And that's where the whole Mad King label gets really problematic. They used claims of mental illness to justify their actions, but the evidence was flimsy at best.
They got his uncle, Prince Luitpold, on board to be regent, but Luitpold wanted proof of insanity, so they compiled this medical report, the Ärztliches Gutachten.
But the way they put it together was shady, to say the least. They relied heavily on gossip and complaints from Ludwig's staff. His shyness, his avoidance of duties, his eccentric eating habits, even his fantasies were held against him.
Even Bismarck had doubts about the report, calling it rakings from the king's wastepaper basket. He saw it as a power grab by the ministers, and he wasn't wrong.
And get this, the 4 psychiatrists who signed the report declaring Ludwig paranoid and unfit to rule never even properly examined him.
Only one, Bernhard von Guden, had even met him briefly years earlier. It's a shocking lack of due process. Modern interpretations suggest possibilities like schizotypal personality disorder or even Pick's disease, but back then it was just madness.
And to make things even murkier, Ludwig's brother and heir, Otto, was also considered mentally unfit. The whole idea of hereditary insanity was being used to control the situation.
The deposition itself is a wild story. June 10, 1886, the commission arrives at Neuschwanstein in the middle of the night.
And they're turned away by the local police, who'd been tipped off. You have Baroness Sparrow von Trixis defending Ludwig with her umbrella.
It's almost comical. Ludwig even arrested the commissioners briefly before letting them go. But he hesitated to rally support, and that was his downfall.
On June 12th, a second commission captured him and took him to Berg Castle on Lake Starnberg. When he questioned Gudin about the insanity diagnosis, Gudin just cited overwhelming documentary evidence, meaning those staff reports.
And then, the very next day, both Ludwig and Gudin are found dead in the lake. The official ruling, suicide by drowning. But there's no water in Ludwig's lungs, and he was a strong swimmer.
Plus, Gudin's body showed signs of a struggle, blows to the head, and strangulation. It just doesn't add up.
Some say Ludwig was shot while trying to escape, but there were no bullet wounds on his body. There's even a story about a countess who claimed to have his coat with bullet holes.
It's a mystery that persists to this day. Despite all the controversy, his funeral was a huge event. He lay in state in Munich, holding white jasmine picked by Empress Elizabeth.
Buried in St. Michael's Church, his heart sent to the shrine of Our Lady of Altötting, as per Bavarian tradition. His brother Otto took the throne, but he was unfit, so Prince Luitpold remained regent.
And when Luitpold died, his son Ludwig eventually deposed Otto and became King Ludwig III. Talk about a messy succession.
So what's Ludwig II's legacy? He was a king who abandoned his duties to pursue his artistic passions. Was he mad or just eccentric?
Even Empress Elizabeth thought he was just a dreamer, not insane. He famously said, "I wish to remain an eternal enigma to myself and to others." And in a way, he has.
It's ironic that the castles that caused him so much trouble are now major tourist attractions, bringing in huge revenue for Bavaria.
From financial ruin to a posthumous economic boon, quite a turn of events. His architectural legacy includes Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, even the Lost Winter Garden.
And we can't forget his support for Wagner, without which we might not have some of the greatest operas ever written. He also founded the Staatstheater am Gärtnerplatz in Munich, promoting a vibrant theater scene.
Some even say he inspired the ballet Swan Lake. His influence on art and culture is undeniable.
Ludwig II, a king, a dreamer, a patron, an enigma. He challenged the very definition of what it meant to be a ruler, and his story continues to fascinate us today.
So, what do you think? Was he truly mad, or just a victim of his time and his own passions? Maybe there's no easy answer. His story is a reminder that history is full of complexity, and judging the past is never simple.
Exactly. And for you listening, what resonates with you about Ludwig's story? What questions are you left with? Do you want to explore the architecture of Neuschwanstein, the relationship between Ludwig and Wagner, or the mysteries surrounding his death?
There's so much more to discover.
And that's the beauty of a deep dive like this. It's just the beginning of the journey.